So I got started right here in this building we're in today, which is the Live Theatre in Newcastle. Um, I had I joined the Drama Society when I was at university and tried acting, which I was absolutely terrible at. And then I ended up writing a play with a friend. And we took that up to Edinburgh. And I sort of thought, I love this is what I want to do. But I didn't really know and then university was over. And I sort of felt a bit lost and I didn't really know what to do next. And then there was thank God, there was an organisation that started up that very year, which was New Writing North, which was a sort of, what's funding organisation right here. Eventually their offices were in the Live Theatre. And they started a bursary, which was to write a play, basically. And you got a full commission. And I applied for that, and you had to suggest an idea, and I had this idea. There was a black comedy about the Craze coming to Newcastle, although in the end of the play it's not the Craze. And I got accepted. And then this became like a little home for me for the next few years, really. So I did Bones, that play was called Bones, I did that here. I did another play with the Live Theatre. That transferred down to London. I got an agent off the back of that, and then they said, "You want to work in film at all?" I actually said no, because it seemed too distant and strange. But then when I eventually did try it, it felt very natural. But yeah, it all started right here for me. There's two things. One is when I was 4 years old, when I was very little, they used to keep catching me lying on the floor with the speakers on the record player on either side of my head, and I was listening to. We had two albums. One was Great War themes, and one was Great Western themes. And when nobody could stop me, I would put them on and listen. And I think that was maybe the start of something. Looking back, I mean, I was a strange boy, but I think that was the start of running films through in my head. And then I guess 80s and 90s, when I was sort of in my teens. I mean, I've been brought up like most people, watching black and white movies that were on a Saturday afternoon, endless war films, endless westerns, Humphrey Bogart. So the film had always been there. But then I guess in my teens, discovering sort of 70s American cinema for the first time. I remember seeing Quite Close Together for the first time, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and Midnight Cowboy, and suddenly feeling this is something completely different. It's a little bit like, what a teenager goes through with music, where they suddenly discover their own music, and this is mine, and this is a new world opening up to me. It felt like that. And then and then sort of a little later, late teens, early 20s, there was sort of American, I guess, new wave sort of comedy, sort of Hal Hartley. The Coen Brothers were huge. I mean, the Coen Brothers were the biggest influence when I was young. I mean, that's really what I wanted to do, those kind of. There was something about that mix of darkness and comedy, and they were clever, but they were also quite slapstick. It was a strange mix of everything, and I really loved them. So they were a huge influence. I mean, I think your writing career sounds you're saying that, but I suppose I do have a writing career. A writing career you go through a series of stages of feeling slightly more secure in calling yourself a writer. And the first really important one for me, as I say, was the Live Theatre, because I was for the first time paid and put on a play for an audience. And another really important one for me, because this was quite small and local, and eventually it sort of almost felt like friends putting on a play. What felt very important was applying to a BBC bursary for radio, which was Manchester then, so Manchester Drama, did most of BBC Drama, Sue Roberts, and getting that. And there were various schemes that you could go on, for a week, where you worked up an idea for radio drama and then actually recorded it there in one of the Alvin Foundation houses. And that was I remember that feeling like a big stepping stone somehow. I felt like, and it was maybe one of the first times that I thought, I think I really do know how to do this, which I didn't, by the way. I was far too early to be thinking that, but I felt that way anyway, and I was encouraged, and it was the BBC. So that made a huge difference. Suddenly it was the BBC saying, why don't you do something for us? And I did, and I started writing some radio plays. I remember winning it, and again, there was, because it was, this is going to sound boasting, it felt like quite a prestigious prize. It was a big award. And of course, the other really vital thing when you're starting out as a writer, it's very, very hard to make a living. So any of those awards or bursaries, they really can make the difference between. I had a lot of friends when I was young who wanted to be actors. And it was kind of like, going over the trenches and running at the enemy, how quickly people would drop throughout their 20s, because it's just really hard to keep going. And it was the same for writing, it was like, how much longer can I keep going, really, with almost no money? So every time you'd get an award like that, not only would it sort of give you the confidence, but it was literally a financial lifeline. It's it's something I haven't done for a long time. I did it for a while then when I was sort of quite a young writer, and I would quite like to go back to it. And I think that's quite common. It's a really misleading form um, because they used to create a lot of drama, so there was a big demand for writers. So often it was where writers would cut their teeth. You would do an afternoon play or maybe even a series at tea time or something like that. So it was often writers early in their career that were doing it. It's actually a very difficult medium. So the other thing that would sometimes happen is you would get great writers who would come back and, because they wanted the challenge of the radio drama. So I remember sort of, hearing like there's a Beckett radio play, I think it's All That Fall, which I thought was incredible. Or there's a Howard Barker play for radio, which again I just thought was incredible because it's a really intense form of drama. I mean, there is no silence like the silence in a radio play. You could almost lean in between a line, but it's very difficult. It's incredibly focused and lean. You have to really know what you're doing to do it well. So I would sort of look the challenge of trying again. Actually, it is very hard to say, and I think it's hard to say because it's a sort of a relational thing. It's always a dance between you and the book or you and the author, and so you have to find different techniques every time, handle it in a different way. Tinker Tailor was very much a sort of deconstructing and reconstructing process. Wolf Hall, which was sort of huge, wide forest, an embarrassment of riches. You had to, in a way, kind of find a single path through, because you just couldn't do it all, and it would fall apart. And then something like Conclave, which fell so beautifully into filmic shape, straight from the book, felt like miniature work. It felt like sort of constant little checks and balances. So you have to sort of bring a different relationship to the work, depending on the book, I think. I mean, I always want to do that, and the three we talked about, I think often, the greater the author, the more relaxed they are about the adaptation, is the truth, I think, because they don't have anything to prove, they're not defensive. I think they will probably usually already understand how the adaptation process works. So Le Carré was incredibly generous and relaxed about the whole thing, quite cavalier in suggesting changes, which I ended up feeling more protective of the novel than I think he was. Hilary was lovely to work with, and Robert's been absolutely lovely on Conclave. So yeah, I mean, ideally what you want is for the author to say, "I'm here if you need me, but I'll book it off if you don't." I find this really interesting because you're working with someone else's story, and yet for me, I think when it's worked, it's because I've also found a story within that's mine in some way, or perhaps I've just connected with an element of their story in a way that feels personal. So I've discovered, to my surprise, that I'm telling the same story again and again, even when I'm adapting someone else's work, which is loosely to do with loyalty and betrayal. It's most explicit in Tinker Tailor, obviously, because it's about the search for a traitor. But then with Wolf Hall, which I think there were many ways you could, many stories you could tell with Wolf Hall. But I focused very early on, it's a revenge story about those who were loyal to the Cardinal Wolsey and those who betrayed him. And Conclave also, in a way, is about the cardinals who are loyal to the dead Pope and want to try and honour his wishes, and those who are traitors. I finally realised this is what I was doing, and I don't know why. I don't know why it's that story. And knowing it doesn't make much difference. I'll do it next time, and it's strange. It doesn't help and it doesn't hinder either. This is a little but really useful thing that I think I just probably worked out for myself, which is when you finish your day's work, make sure you stop at a point where you know what you're going to do next. And preferably, you're looking forward to what you're going to do next. So that when you come back in the morning, it's kind of like the engines, it's an easy start on the engine. You know what you're doing, you can get back into it, and then it's much easier to move on to the unknown area. What's deadly is coming down to the desk and it's just a blank page and you have no idea what you're supposed to do next. It can take a long time to get the engine running again then. It depends again on the project. So sometimes I don't love outlines, but sometimes they are necessary. Tinker Tailor, because it was such a restructuring And there were many different ways you could put that film together. It's the only time I did the old kind of traditional corkboard and index cards, and we keep moving them around and thinking, is it that shape, you know? So we'd have, in that sense, a sense of, I know what the next scene is, I know what the next scene is. Sometimes I will do a sort of an outline breakdown of some points on a beat sheet of some sort, which with each element. Sometimes I'll have that just for the next few, so I know, say, what the first act is going to be made of. Again, obviously, if it's an adaptation of a book, you're working with some kind of structure, even if you are pulling it apart. Sometimes I quite like, with an original, just writing and not quite knowing where it's going. That also can feel, sometimes that feels the most exciting and the most like writing. The simply staying in the game is about 80% of the work, is the truth. If you just hang around long enough, things get easier. Which is, again, sort of this, you know, for young writers, you just think, just hold on, because it does get easier. Don't be one of the ones that drops early on in the race. I'm going to pick a couple of films, and I'm going to pick I'll pick a box set. I think I would have to have a Coen Brothers just because, out of loyalty. And maybe Big Lebowski just because it always feels sort of heartwarming. I would want something clever to make me seem intellectual. Maybe Antonioni, Ventura, or Eclipse, just to show off. Although there's no one else in the desert island, so I don't know what I'm showing off to. And then a box set. I mean, this is probably what everybody says, but, you know, Golden Age, HBO, Sopranos, or maybe Deadwood. Either of those I'd be very happy to keep watching.